There are some things that simply don't strike my fancy, and I doubt that I can force myself to be educated in it. Even if I try to read about it, it bounces off. On the other hand, when there's a subject I'm ferociously interested in, then it is easy for me to learn about it. I read it, I absorb it, I take it in gladly and cheerfully. I've written more books on astronomy than on any other science, and no one has ever complained that my astronomical books are wrong, silly, anything like that. I've never taken a course in astronomy. I'm completely self-trained in it. On the other hand, I've written relatively few books on chemistry, which is my training. I've got a PhD in chemistry, but I know too much chemistry to get excited over it, whereas astronomy is different.
Excited. Learning really excites you, doesn't it?
Oh yes, I think it's the actual process of broadening yourself, of knowing there's now a little extra facet of the universe you know about and can think about and can understand. It seems to me that when it's time to die, and that will come to all of us, there'd be a certain pleasure in thinking that you had utilized your life well, that you had learned as much as you could, gathered in as much as possible of the universe, and enjoyed it. I mean, there's only this one universe and only this one lifetime to try to grasp it. And while it is inconceivable that anyone can grasp more than a tiny portion of it, at least do that much. I mean, what a tragedy just to pass through and get nothing out of it. I'm gradually managing to cram my mind more and more full of things. I've got this beautiful mind, and it's going to die, and it'll all be gone. And then I say, not in my case. Every idea I've ever had, I've written down, and it's all there on paper. And I won't be gone. It'll be there. What made Bing Crosby or Bob Hope play all that golf? You know, they enjoyed it, and that's the way it is with me.
Can we have a revolution in learning?
Yes, I think not only we can, but I think we're going to have to. As computers take over more and more of the work that human beings shouldn't be doing in the first place because it doesn't utilize their brain, it stultifies and bores them to death, there's going to be nothing left for human beings to do but the more creative types of endeavor. And the only way we can indulge in the more creative types of endeavor is to have brains that aim at that from the start. You can't take a human being and put him to work at a job that underuses the brain and keep him working at it for decades and decades and then say, well, that job isn't there, go do something more creative. You have beaten the creativity out of him. But if from the start children are educated into appreciating their own creativity, then probably we can, almost all of us, be creative. Just as in the old days, very few people could read and write. Literacy was a very novel sort of thing, and you felt that most people just didn't have it in them. But when you indulged in mass education, it turned out that most people could be taught to read and write. In the same way, if instead of having mass education, as we now have, must have, with a curriculum, once we have outlets, computer outlets in every home, each of them hooked up to enormous libraries where anyone can ask any question and be given answers, be given reference material, be something you're interested in knowing. From an early age, however silly it might seem to someone else, that's what you're interested in. And you ask, and you can find out, and you can follow it up. And you can do it in your own home, at your own speed, in your own direction, in your own time. Then everyone will enjoy learning. Nowadays, what people call learning is forced on you, and everyone is forced to learn the same thing on the same day at the same speed in class. And everyone is different. For some it goes too fast, for some too slow, for some in the wrong direction. But give them a chance, in addition to school, I don't say we abolish school, but in addition to school, to follow up their own bent from the start. It's through this machine that for the first time we'll be able to have a one-to-one relationship between information source and information consumer, so to speak. Well, in the old days, you used to have tutors for children. A person who could afford it would hire a pedagogue, a tutor, and he would teach the children, and if he knew his job, he could adapt his teaching to the tastes and abilities of the students, you see. But how many people could afford to hire a pedagogue? Most children went uneducated. Then we reached the point where it's absolutely necessary to educate everybody. But the only way we could do it is to have one teacher for a great many of students, and in order to organize the situation properly, we gave them a curriculum to teach from. So how many teachers are good at this too? Like in everything else, the number of teachers is far greater than the number of good teachers. So we either have a one-to-one relationship for the very few or a one-to-many relationship for the many. Now, there's a possibility of a one-to-one relationship for the many. Everyone can have a teacher in the form of access to the gathered knowledge of the human species.
Through the libraries that are connected to the computer.
That's right.
On my desk in my home.
Right.
I can sit there and call up, well, what if I want to learn only about baseball?
Well, that's all right. You learn all you want about baseball, because the more you learn about baseball, the more you might grow interested in mathematics to try to figure out what they mean by those earned run averages and the batting averages and so on. You might in the end become more interested in math than baseball if you follow your own bent and you're not told. On the other hand, someone who is interested in mathematics may suddenly find himself very enticed by the problem of how you throw a curved ball. And he may find himself engaged in sports physics, so to speak. Well, why not? Why not?
So you're, in a sense, every student has his or her own private school?
Yes, and it belongs to him or her. He can be the sole dictator of what he is going to learn, of what he is going to study. And mind you, this is not all he's going to do. He'll still be going to school for some things that he has to know. But he's got to look forward to the fun in life, which is following his own bent.
This revolution you're talking about, personal learning, it's not just for the young, is it?
No, that's a good point. No, it's not just for the young. That's another trouble with education as we now have it. It is for the young, and people think of education as something that they can finish. And what's more, when they finish, that's a rite of passage into manhood.
Real world.
Right.
I've
finished with school. I'm no more a child. And therefore, anything that reminds you of school, reading books, having ideas, asking questions, that's kid stuff. Now you're an adult, you don't do that sort of thing anymore, you see?
And in fact, like prison, the reward of school is getting out.
Exactly.
And kids begin to say, when you're getting out.
And every kid knows that. Every kid knows the only reason he's in school is because he's a kid and little and weak, and as soon as and in fact, if he manages to get out early, if he drops out, why, he's just a premature man.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. In the city, I've talked to some of these dropouts, and they think they're there. They think they've become men because they're out of school.
That's right.
What's wrong with this?
Well, what's wrong with it is you have everybody looking forward to no longer learning, and you make them ashamed afterwards of going back to learning. If you have something like this, then anyone, any age, can learn by himself, can continue to be interested. There's no reason then, if you enjoy learning, why you should stop at a given age. People don't stop things they enjoy doing just because they reach a certain age. They don't stop playing tennis just because they turn 40. They don't stop with sex just because they turn 40. They keep it up as long as they can if they enjoy it. And learning will be the same thing. The trouble with learning is most people don't enjoy it because of the circumstances. Make it possible for them to enjoy learning, and they'll keep it up. There's the famous story about Oliver Wendell Holmes, who lived to be well into his 90s. He was in the hospital one time. He had not long to live. He was over 90 already. And President Roosevelt came to see him. And there was Oliver Wendell Holmes reading a Greek grammar. And Roosevelt said, "Why are you reading a Greek grammar, Mr. Holmes?" And Mr. Holmes said, "To improve my mind, Mr. President."